Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second recording for this NWC short videos, looking at a next generation network demand, next generation organization. I'm Aaron Bosen-Patel, and I'm the Vice President of AI Customer Experience at TM Forum. Absolutely delighted on this second webinar to have Angus Ward, who's the CEO of BearingPoint Beyond, to answer some questions with us. And they really look at digital platform solutions for helping grow revenue. And on the last webinar that we had, you very much heard about the technical demands on the network that we're going to have, going towards 5G and looking at new solutions such as AI and blockchain. And on this webinar today, we're actually going to concentrate very much on, well, what does that mean for revenue? What does that mean for the business side? So Angus, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you couldn't join us on the other webinar, but we were talking very much about the next generation network demands. And with that, we obviously talked about 5G and how 5G is going to put huge strain on the network through increased data, through the price of antenna, and therefore the need for automation and demand. And we all have to sit back and say, well, that's quite expensive when you start thinking about all the new technologies we've got to do to grow revenues. And I think when we think of 5G, we often think of, faster broadband speeds as the first wave of broadband. But really, B2B is the North Star for that 5-star revenue, Angus. I mean, how do CSPs get there?
I think that's a good question. The big challenge is that typically, thus far in the story, CSPs had the major focus has really been the mass consumer market with some B2B. What's going to happen now? Is that 5G is really a solution which is primarily angled at B2B and businesses, and so the business model that they've been brought up with needs to fundamentally change. And something like $1 trillion will be spent on 5G over the next 5-6 years, and the revenues are about sub 2%. So how do CSPs really find the way to get payback and monetize their investment in 5G? And that is all the new business models. It's all the new solutions. So it's important for CSPs to recognize that the B2B will be the primary market. And in doing so, they have to look at how they're going to change, how they're going to adapt, and really innovate and create new products and services which will grow revenue.
So Angus, we often talk about that, that 5G is really in the B2B space, because obviously in the B2C market, it really is just about, faster speeds and maybe some wireless fixed broadband. But do the businesses really believe in 5G? It's one thing saying that, that's where the opportunity lies for operators, but do you think actually the enterprises and the businesses are thinking about 5G and the operators are there to give some of these new solutions?
So I think we done some recent research, and that's a really interesting question. I think it varies by region. So what our research really showed was that if you look out at Asia, something like 66% of CSPs we interviewed are not really sure about what the primary use cases will be or where their focus should be. They're very technology centric. They're trying to sell primarily connectivity-based solutions. If you go over to Europe, I think in Europe is a little bit more wait and see. So 73% of CSPs said that they thought their primarily focus would be still in the consumer market. They understood the opportunity with an enterprise, but they're still, very much consumer focused. Now that might be because in the short term, they're looking to add 5G assets to their existing assets and really sweat the 4G assets by adding radio and better fiber, and starting to move in the direction of 5G. But it's quite short-term focused. It's only really in the US. Now, if you talk to the US, 77% of US CSPs believe the primary focus has to be around vertical industry use cases, and they're really focused on how to make B2B work and how to change their business model, so they focus on creating new use cases within an industry. Now, to do that, it requires some deeper changes to happen within the CSPs. What you're talking about is that CSPs have thus far been very focused on product and probably less focused on customer. And how do you move from a product-centric organization to more of a customer-centered organization? That means understanding the problems and concerns of industry in each of the use cases, and then inverting that really to be able to take customer problems and create solutions fit for each industry.
And that's great. And really, Angus, where do we think that those opportunities are really going to lie? I think, you picked up on something very important before when you said, kind of the nature of the business needs to change.
Yeah.
But service providers often struggle to do that. If we cast back to about 2011, you'll remember all the service providers went to Silicon Valley, they set up their digital business unit. What is the way that they can actually start to change themselves, for this industry and make the best of this B2B opportunity? Because we've seen actually spinning out other parts of businesses to be particularly focused on digital service hasn't worked in the past. Is a different approach needed this time?
Yes, I think. Well, I think that the CSPs need to start now. So I think with IoT and with 4G, there's an opportunity to start to evolve their business model. Now, this has to be top down and leadership driven. No change will ever come bottom up. And so there's an opportunity really for 5G and some of those things that companies have to do to start off with, today with things like IoT. What needs to happen, as I said before, there's some really big things. So the question is, if the new business model in 5G is around how to grow revenue by looking at customer problems and creating proper solutions for a problem. So rather than being product centered and setting standardized connectivity products, instead looking at the different verticals and the opportunity to create solutions with partners, that requires a much more agile, iterative delivery model. It means not doing sort of 3 years of R&D and then thinking about products, but starting off with the vertical industries and understanding what the customer problems are, how they can work with partners, and then iteratively, experimentally create products and services to solve those problems. And then once they've got a sort of market fit, then incrementally adding functionality and capability on, so they're getting richer and richer solutions. I think that it is really important to start soon and start in a small way. So things like starting small and iteratively growing and experimenting the new solutions is really important. So it's not about making big investments and big punts. It's around taking 2 or 3 industry areas and then starting small, starting with the new ways of working, starting to work with ecosystem partners, starting to work with platforms with multi-sided business models, and starting to co-innovate, co-create ideas and solutions which take connectivity, but also build the smart infrastructure layer on top. But then the IoT, the AI, and the different solution elements which create the overall solution package which perfectly solves customer problems.
And Angus, I think there's a couple of things I want to pick out with you. In the past, service providers haven't really been good at partnering, and I think this is something that we keep saying about this new this IoT ecosystem where there's been revenue found. How do we really, therefore, take those opportunities and allow good partnerships to happen? Because I'd say, platform businesses partner. That's what they do. That's what they do very successfully, and that's why they're very successful. Telecom mindset just isn't there really for partnering, is it?
It's a very different way of doing business, and in some respects, the old communications company, the CSP, has to redefine itself as a technology company, because what our research shows is that companies want to buy solutions, and with our research, again, it varies by region, but the CSPs tend not to rank first place in terms of where the enterprises go to find those solutions. The device companies, the big web scale companies, technology consultants, those are often the first port of call they go to, because what they want to buy is the best solutions on the market, and they want to have confidence that CSPs will integrate and bring together the best possible solutions to solve their problems. And so by not partnering, they're making themselves less attractive to their customers. And in this move from being product centered to be customer centered, customers have to have confidence that they will get the best possible solution. And that often means drawing on the skills and expertise of other organizations, whether that's people with deep industry experience or whether it's people with the big R&D budgets like the AWSs, for example, to create those solutions, to co-innovate those solutions. So I think it's an imperative. And all the research we've done shows that enterprises want to buy solutions which bring together the best solution components from whichever companies are out there, and have that sort of overall thing around a solution, not a product.
And when we talk about, you mentioned earlier that they've got to pick a couple of areas to really focus in, Angus. And when we think about the enterprise and the B2B space, we often think about really large companies. We often think about those big guys out there. What about those small to medium businesses that, that people, that might be 3, 5, 10, 15 people companies? Do you think that's an interesting area to get into? Because it's certainly a good market.
So I think one of the things, if you look at 4G, the real winners from 4G were the over-the-top players, and that's the Facebook, Googles, Amazons, and they were small. They were startups. A lot of the innovation came out of that. With the enterprise space, I think that the CIOs don't want to trust startups. Therefore, I think that one of the opportunities is for the CSPs to really look at the problems they can solve for customers, and then looking at where the best solutions come from. So that innovation might come from a startup, but then the trust is with the CSP brands to make sure they get highly resilient, highly secure solutions. That's what enterprise CIOs want to buy. They wouldn't trust maybe going straight to a startup, because this is enterprise scale, security and everything else, but they would trust a CSP to put together the right partnership and to run a complex program to deliver an outcome.
And do you think that really the enterprises still see speed as a killer use case, or do you think there's going to be other things that they want from a certified, so new services maybe in around security, for example, securing their systems as they migrate to the cloud? Is there other business models like that which are very simple just to extend?
So that's a fantastic question, because what we see in our research is that often enterprises will parrot back to surveys what they hear from the industry. So the industry's been talking about 5G, it's about super speeds, low latency, and massive scalability. And so enterprises parrot back those as being the reasons why they'd want to buy 5G. I think what now needs to happen, it needs to be a maturing of messages around actually what 5G is all about, is about really smart solutions. And the CSPs is a great place to go. And so it's all about matching the technology with the use case. And so, yes, 5G does offer, the high speeds and scalability and the low latency, but only in certain scenarios is that the best solution. And so I think what the industry needs to do is that they need to articulate and tell the story in a better way around some of the great solutions that they can make, using different devices, using edge, using AI, using all the different capabilities to create an outcome. At the moment, they're going out telling the enterprises that, it's all about connectivity. And those messages are coming back. That's what enterprises want to buy. But if you look at connectivity, it's only 5% of the revenue in any one use case. And if you're spending $1 trillion on new networks, you need to be looking at 25 to 30% of the revenues of each use case to be able to monetize your 5G network. So you need to go beyond those sound bites about speed to really looking at why 5G creates far better, far more resilient, far more cost-effective, far better solutions for customers.
And I think, this panel, was meant to be about this next generation organization, Angus, and you've spoken about innovation and the need to innovate. How do CSPs get that innovation into the core of their DNA, into the core of that next generation kind of services? Because if we think about, what's happened, and I spend a lot of my time in AI and new technologies, we can actually do all that with 4G. We don't need 5G really for a lot of the services that we're talking about coming through. Why is 5G different, and why do you think we're going to be able to innovate because we've got a new G, as opposed to actually innovating across things such as 4G?
So I think innovation is a solution to a problem, and it's in looking at the problems you're trying to solve. And so if one takes this move away from selling products to creating solutions which solve customer problems, it's really in terms of being ambitious about which sectors, where the big problems, where the real things which the CSPs can really help the enterprise customers solve. So it's all about getting much closer to enterprises, having a much more collaborative relationship with those customers to really get insight as to the nature of the problems and how you solve them. And then really is that co-create and co-innovate with partners where you blend together those different types of skills. The problem thus far is, is that in just selling connectivity, you're leaving the customers the problem of doing the innovation themselves and all the integration and all the risk and all the cost. And what CSPs want to do is they want to actually step out of that and just consume a service which is available pay-per-click with none of the upfront costs. And so in being ambitious about the problems and types of solutions that they provide, that is the catalyst for innovation.
And Angus, one question as we come to the close of this now is, I want to ask you, is about the way that telecom providers can actually really start to compete with these large-scale OTTs. We've talked about partnerships and need to innovate these new business models, but is the investors really going to allow service providers to invest in these areas? We're still very much based on quarterly figures, squeezing the very last bit of water out of the sponge, if you like, really trying to push in that area. But this requires investment. So is that whole model wrong, that actually you've got to get, you're sacrificing short-term figures actually for the long-term part of the business? And how do you get that change in mindset?
I think it's a really important question, because every CFO for any CSP is under pressure to pay the dividend every quarter, and in terms of being able to create the space in order to innovate, there needs to be top-down leadership, and it has to be driven top-down. Secondly, it's really important that you start small and you start early and you move incrementally. I think the problem gets worse and worse and worse the later you leave it. I think you also need to have, be looking at, investing in the enterprise business. One of our recent surveys showed that something like 47% of CSPs believe the enterprise segment will be bigger than their consumer segment within 2 years. But only 28% of the investment is going into enterprise. Most of it is still in consumer. And so I think that, yes, there is a need for investment, and there's a completely different business model, and that will create a new operating model and where you innovate. But the important thing is that if enterprises really believe that, so if CSPs really believe that enterprise is the area which will grow because of 5G, because of IoT, because of all these new technologies, then it's important they start to switch their investment away from mass consumer markets to where they think the money is. At the moment, the money still is going towards consumer, and they're still doing what they've always done, which, coming back, is why under 5G, 73% of EMEA, of Europeans, CSPs still believe that they should be focusing on the consumer market, even though they know in the long term the enterprise market is where the money is going to be made.
And Angus, as a final question, sorry to put you on the spot here, can you give us kind of your top takeaways, how CSPs are really going to thrive and become platform players in the 5G era?
So I think the top takeaway is that I think don't wait for 5G, start to change your business model now. Secondly, I think that you have to really look at focusing on 2 or 3 areas where you think you have innate skills. It might be there's a concentration of your customer base in certain areas. Thirdly, I think you've got to be bold and be willing to experiment and change your ways of working, and start to actually look at customer problems and change that dynamic of starting off with products to moving towards the customer side and creating those collaborative relationships with customers, to start to look at those close relationships you need in order to understand their problems, to create solutions. So I think it's an evolution away from product-centric, standardized products, just connectivity, to trying to create solutions which address real customer problems, greater customer loyalty, greater revenue, greater ARPU. That's the prize, really.
Thanks. And that reminds me of that ancient proverb that just came to mind. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. And I think that's very much what you're saying. Don't wait for 5G. Start now.
Absolutely.
Get started with that 5 step. Angus, well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you today on these MWC shorts. Huge thanks to Alex Lawrenson, the GSMA, for allowing us to do this today. And I hope all of the listeners and all the viewers out there have enjoyed it. Thank you very much, and look forward to connecting with you all soon.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.